നാരായണ ഗുരു എന്ന വിവർത്തകൻ എന്ന സെഷന് അധ്യക്ഷത വഹിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് നമ്മോട് സംസാരിക്കുന്നത് ശ്രീമതി മൃണാളിനിയാണ്. ഡോക്ടർ ശ്രീ മൃണാളിനി is a retired professor in Telugu and comparative literature. She is a well-known scholar in fiction, criticism and translation and media. Mrunalini has written 25 books including short stories, literary criticism, translation and biography. She has presented around 2000 shows on television in literature and feminism. Currently she is working as a professor in സിലിക്കോൺട്ര യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റി ഓഫ് കാലിഫോർണിയ US. നിരൂപകയും വിവർത്തകയും ചെറുകഥാകൃത്തുമായ ഡോക്ടർ ശ്രീ മൃണാളിനിയെ അധ്യക്ഷ പ്രസംഗത്തിന് വേണ്ടി ക്ഷണിക്കുന്നു. വെൽക്കം യു മാഡം.
Good morning to all. I am very sorry I won't be able to speak in Malayalam, which you would like me to, but I can't. I can just understand Malayalam a bit. I am from Hyderabad, so Telugu. So my lecture, my chairman address would be in English. You have to excuse me for that. At the outset, I would like to thank Sahitya Akademi and especially my colleague in Sahitya Akademi, convener of Malayalam Advisory Board, Sri KP Ramanundi, for inviting me for this August occasion. And I also thank Ajit ji for hosting all of us here for the 2 days. With this, I'll share a few words about how I am going to approach this subject. Actually, my session is about the translations of Guru. But since I have not read the translations, I can't say much about the books per se. And these two people, of course, the paper presenters will do complete justice to it, so I don't have to say anything about it, except that I noticed from what I've read of Narayana Guru, that his translations were not actually verbal, word-to-word translations, literal translations. He took a little freedom in translation. He imbibed the gist of it and reproduced it, which I would call actually a creative translation. So that is actually the best way of translating a text if you want it to get across to the target reader. So I can see that Narayana Guru's translations must have been very good, and about both these books you will be listening from them. So right now, what am I going to speak? Since there is nothing I can tell you people about Narayana Guru, what you don't know, so I'll try to see as an outsider. I don't belong to Kerala. I haven't been brought up in a tradition of listening to Guru's sayings or reading about him or learning about him from the school days itself. So as an outsider, how would I look at him? What are the things that I find very refined and peculiar and outstanding about him? What makes him a colossal figure in the 19th century and early 20th century India? So these are a few things I would like to dwell upon. And also, being a student and teacher of comparative literature, maybe I would compare him with a few, including my own language, Telugu. So where I would like to start is, mostly, the first thing we know about him is, I found very impressive, is that he combined social consciousness with spiritual consciousness, which is a very rare attribute. In 19th century social reform movement, we know people who had social consciousness, starting from Rajaram Mohan Rai, Keshav Chandra Sen from Bengal, up to Kandukuri Veerashalingam Pantul, our own Telugu first modern writer. They were all socially conscious and they tried to change the society, and they spoke and fought on the side of the downtrodden, and especially women. But there were others, like you say, you have a Brahma Samaj or an Arya Samaj or a Theosophical Society or a Ramakrishna Mission, which were mostly dwelling upon the spiritual side of a human being's life. So these two meeting in one place is where Narayana Guru emerges. Well, there were two types of reformers. One was a religious reformer. One institution was of religious reform. The other institution was of a social reform. Narayana Guru is unique in the sense that he has combined these two, and he has brought social consciousness along with spiritual awakening in the people of his time. So that is the main issue that I found that it was remarkable, which I don't think any other single person has done. A few people may have tried to do it. For instance, in Telugu itself, if I have to compare Narayana Guru with any one single person, I'm not able to. I'll have to combine 4 people to make one Narayana Guru. So it so happens that in Telugu we have 4 different people or 4 different institutions who were trying to give this social and religious consciousness, spiritual, I would say spiritual, not religious, spiritual consciousness to people. But I have to take 4 or 5 examples, 4 or 5 people as examples to compare with him. That is where his uniqueness lies. That is where he becomes a colossal figure, because he could combine both. If we can talk about others before Narayana Guru who did the same thing, because I think when we are talking about one particular South Indian language, we have to remember that all the 4 South Indian languages were very close. They all come from the root Dravid language. So we know the Dravidian family. So they are very close. Even culturally, they are very close. So once we look back into history, there are 2 people from other languages who stand out, who look like predecessors to Narayana Guru. The first person I would like to mention, yesterday Dr. H.S. Sivaprakash was just passing by on his name. He didn't elaborate. He was Basavanna, the 12th century reformer, Veerashaiva. He was the founder of the Veerashaiva Matam. Basavanna is one person from the 12th century who combined, who made religion an inclusive one. Yesterday again, Sivaprakash was saying that Shankaracharya's Advaita was an exclusive one, while Narayana Guru's was an inclusive one. So this sort of inclusiveness, including all the castes, both the genders, into the fold of Shaiva, that is what Basavanna achieved in his lifetime. So I would say he was the first one. We all know that he writes in Kannada. He wrote in Kannada. But he was the first religious reformist who could combine both social consciousness and spiritual consciousness with the same maxim, one God, one religion. The same maxim, he did that in 12th century. So, and incidentally, the story of Basavanna was not made into a biography in Kannada language, it was a biography in Telugu language. Basavanna has a biography in the same century, 12th century, his own contemporary from Telugu language, Palkuriki Somanatha, wrote the biography of Basavanna. So you see this concept of including the downtrodden, everyone into one fold, going against the Chaturvarna Vyavastha and bringing everybody together with one idea, one religion, one belief and one humanity. That was started by Basavanna and then followed, and it was spread by a Telugu poet, Palkuriki Somana, who wrote Basava Puranam. And then we have in Telugu, in 15th century, one more predecessor of Narayana Guru, whom I can say, further we can do comparative studies of these people and decide whose job was a greater one, whose contribution was greater. We can talk about that separately. I am just leaving a few feelers, because we all believe that literature has to be studied in comparison, mostly, because Indian literature is one. As our President Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan said once, India has many languages, but the literature is one. So, with all the 24 recognized languages, our literature remains Indian. So, when we are talking about one particular poet, we need to think about others who did the same thing simultaneously or before him. So, we have this Annamaya, Telugu poet, who wrote more or less exactly like Narayana Guru, especially about the caste. Annamacharya himself, as his name suggests, he was a Brahmin. He was from a Brahmin family from Rayalaseema. He was actually what we would call a balladeer. He was singing and going around the country, propagating his ideas. He was not a philosopher per se. He was simply singing. He was the progenitor of the Carnatic music. You have Carnatic music now, Carnatic classical music. Annamacharya along with Purandaradasa. These were 2 contemporaries. They were the founders of the Carnatic music that we sing now. So this Annamacharya used to go into the villages, sing his song, Brahma Mokkate, Parabrahma Mokkate was his very famous song. In that he says, sleep is the same for a rich king on the lavish bed or the servant in the corner. The soil of a Brahmin treads upon is the same as the soil an outcast treads on. Sunshine falling on an enticing elephant is the same as sunshine falling on the dog on the earth. This song goes on saying that not just human beings, every creation of God is the same. He goes on to say that everything, from the smallest insect to supposedly the greatest caste Brahmin, everybody is the same. Similarly, he writes mostly about humanity and the ultimate salvation. That is the theme, liberation of the self, how you recognize yourself. He doesn't specifically say Advaita, but he does have some intonation which says it is Advaita. In fact, he was the first one, even before Shakespeare. Annamaria said the world is a stage. We all know Shakespeare said that. All the world is stage, all men and women are actors. That is a very prominent Shakespeare's quote in the play, As You Like It. But actually, Annamaya said, this Nanati Batuku Natakamu Kanaka Kannadi Kaivalyamu. Annamaya talks about how the world itself is a stage, and we are all just between opening our eyes in the birth, closing our eyes in death. The rest of the life in between these two is just play acting. We are only acting a role. So our ultimate aim should be liberation from this self. And you became one with the God. You become one with the God. These type of songs, which I think even you can see in Narayana Guru's writings, this sort of liberation of the self, understanding the self and he and I are the same, understanding I am one with the God, this sort of Aham Brahmasmi, this sort of Advaita you can see in Annamaya also. Though Annamaya would prefer to call himself Visishta Advaita. That's a different matter. We have to talk about Ramanuja for that. That's a different topic. I'm not going to go into that. So we have one Basavanna and one Annamaya who were both predecessors of Narayana Guru. I don't know whether Narayana Guru read them or knew about them. That's a different question. That is something we have to research upon. But if he had, even if he had not, I can say that these two people, this sort of a tradition of having an inclusiveness in our so-called rigid Sanatana Dharma or Hindutva started in the 12th century itself. And Narayana Guru is the prominent example in the 19th and 20th centuries. Another thing which I found very interesting in Narayana Guru, now I'll come to him after I dwelt upon Basaveshwara and Annamaya. Another interesting thing is those who call themselves progressive, those who call themselves social reformers, they usually casticized Sanskrit. They were against Sanskrit. Especially this happened in both Tamil Nadu and Telugu areas. When you're talking about the people, you're talking more about the people. You're talking about this life, now this life and your own society, and you're talking about the caste system, then you are against Sanskrit. I think in Malayalam also you have a Malayalam language movement. Sometimes, in 1920s when Narayana Guru was also alive. So that movement was there in Telugu. Of course, it's always been there in Tamil. So these movements were going on. In spite of that, being a man of the masses, Narayana Guru in one sense was a man of the masses. He worked for the masses. But he never thought that Sanskrit is an impediment to that. He used Sanskrit. You see the way he combines everything. He combines social consciousness with spiritual consciousness. He combines a social reform movement with the classical language. He moved it so Sanskrit, he wrote in Sanskrit, he translated from Sanskrit, and even in Malayalam, he wrote in Manipravalam. You see, when the social reform movement came, the genres of literature also changed. Either in Telugu or Tamil or Bengali, anywhere you can see, the Kavya, the Prabandha, Mahakavya have gone. Instead of that, you have a novel, you have a short story, you have a drama. All new genres emerged once the social movement after 1860s. We know in all languages it happened. But Narayana Guru still stuck to the Mahakavya tradition. He still stuck to a Shatakam. He took 5 verses, 10 verses, 15 verses. He wrote in all these sort of meters. And he used the Sanskrit chand like Matebham. So he was still writing in the traditional classical mode. But the ideas were all novel, the ideas were all contemporary, the ideas always included everybody in humanity. They were not archaic ideas. The concepts were new, the concepts were modern. But the language he used, even Malayalam, what I've heard is he used a high language. Even Tamil, he used high language. He could understand classical Tamil better than the Tamilians themselves. So we can see that the way he was able to imbibe the contrasting elements of the society and literature into one, I think that's one of the greatest achievements. Using Sanskrit to propagate social consciousness is not a small thing. It's not an easy thing. But he managed to do that. He didn't have to go to Kalakval Malayalam for that. So that is another aspect which I found very interesting in him. So when I thought that he is unique in the way he can bring a cohesiveness between different elements, both in literature and in society, that is the reason he could attract a lot of people to himself. Because he was appealing to everybody, everybody's consciousness. He could do that. whoever the person was, whether the upper caste, whether the lower caste, whoever he was, he could appeal to every one of them because of this balance of mind. What we usually called samyamanam in Telugu, that sort of a balance he could show in everything he did. That's one of his greatest attributions as far as I can see, even if I'm seeing it from the outside. So when I come to the 19th century of Telugu, I'll just give a few, 2-3 examples of writers, and then I'll close. When I come to Telugu, in the 19th century, as I said, I can see 3 or 4 people who appear very much like Narayan Guru to me. The first one is Kandukuri Veerashalingam Pantulu, our first modern writer. He also felt that knowledge is possible only through education, and knowledge is possible through freedom. These are the concepts both Kandukuri and later Gurajada, they agreed with about what Narayan Guru said similarly. So struggling especially against all the superstitions we had. I know that Narayan Guru fought against superstitions, even in the yagas. He was talking about different type of yagas, a symbolic yaga instead of pouring all ghee. So Kandukuri Veerashalingam Pantulu totally agreed with him. He disagreed with all the superstition, every piece of literature that he wrote. He wrote 4 novels and many stories and plays, a lot of prahasanas. In all that, Kandukuri Veerashalingam specifically attacks superstitions. And he was very, very partial to women. He was not partial to the lower caste like Guru was. He was very partial to women. All his literature was dedicated to women, including his autobiography, which he dedicated to his wife. Veerashalingam Pantulu was one. Then comes Gurajada, who is one with Narayan Guru, especially where caste is concerned. And religion and caste, these are the focus of Gurajada Apparao, who lived up to 1915. He was, in fact, Kandukuri was born in 1848 and died in 1919. A little before, he was born a little before Narayan Guru and died a little before Narayan Guru again. And Gurajada Apparao was more or less his contemporary in birth, but he died very young. He died in 1915 itself. Gurajada Apparao, first modern dramatist, he was totally against this religion. He was very much for one religion, and he was always talking about one humanity, one wholeness of humanity. He was not a spiritual person. But on the other hand, he was saying, మంచి చెడ్డలు ఎంచి చూడగా మనుజులందున రెండే కులములు మంచి అన్నది మాల అయితే మాల నేనవుదున్. There are only 2 castes in this world, good and bad. And if suppose a mala is good, everybody is a mala. You have only to be good and bad. There are no castes in this world. The only thing you have to remember that good and bad, the only caste in this world, that is the only thing you have to accept. That is Gurujada's way of saying. And he believed that all the religions will by default be dismissed from this world. Religions will go away, they will decay. Only knowledge remains. జ్ఞానమొక్కటే నిలిచి వెలుగును, మతములన్నయు మాసిపోవును, జ్ఞానమొక్కటే నిలిచి వెలుగును. That was his dictum. So all the religions will decay after some time. Knowledge is the only thing that survives. And for him, what is knowledge? Love for humanity. దేశమంటే మట్టి కాదో, ఈ దేశమంటే మనుషులో. Anything from Gurujada, it talks about human beings, the welfare of human beings, about humanity. So I can see some comparison between Narayan Guru and Gurujada, Narayan Guru and Veerashalingam Pantulu, and in the lyrical quality of Narayan Guru. Yesterday we saw the dance. I heard his music also. When we saw the dance and how his words, his lyrics were automatically set to it. I can see that, that's why I'm saying that he hasn't lost the Sanskrit tradition, though his concepts were bold and modern. We can see that he retained the literary aesthetics of the Sanskrit tradition. You see, he was using a lot of anuprasas. In Narayan Guru's songs, you can see Vrichyanuprasa and Latanuprasa. This Shabdalankara, we call them. They are all used by him, which give the lyrical quality to any poem, which is why we can hum the poems, we can see the rhyme in the poem, the rhythm. The rhythmic pattern comes only with anuprasa. That anuprasa you see a lot in Narayan Guru's scripture. And in that, I can compare him to our very first romantic poet, Devulapalli Krishna Shastri. I can say he was a lyrical poet, and he said the same thing. He was a Brahmo Samaj followed. So naturally, he was writing about one God. There is no God, there is no Vigraha Radhana. So Krishna Shastri can be comparable to him. That's why I said I can't compare one person with Narayan Guru. He's such a tall figure. I have to talk about 4 or 5 Telugu poets to think of as a whole as Narayan Guru. These 4 will combinedly become Narayan Guru. And lastly, I will say one more thing. There are a lot of other things I can quote and say. You know that Ramana Maharshi is a Tamilian, but Ramana Maharshi was very, very popular in the Telugu land. and our own great writers were followers of Ramana Maharshi. They used to live in Arunachalam. And Ramana Maharshi himself knew Telugu. He wrote in Telugu. Ramana Maharshi wrote 5 poems in Telugu. And when he wrote the 5 poems, you must be knowing the meeting of Ramana Maharshi and Narayana Guru, where they did not actually speak a lot to each other, but they understood each other like only great souls can. Great souls can understand each other just by a look. That's exactly what they both did in that particular incident, which I've been reading about. So that Ramana Maharshi's poetry in Telugu is very much like his Upanishads, the Upanishads of Narayana Guru. So this combined influence of Narayana Guru and Ramana Maharshi can be seen on Telugu poets, especially Chalam. Chalam in his Sudha, he writes exactly the same. This content is more or less the same as Narayana Guru or Ramana Maharshi. So indirectly and directly he has influenced the Telugu poets, and when they were contemporaries, they both thought great minds think alike. So like Kandukuri or Guruzdada thought almost like Narayana Guru. So you can see the parallels as well as the influence. And now lastly, Kumaranashan was a great, you call him Mahakavi, and he is this disciple of the Master Guru. And Kumaranashan wrote I think it's Leela, his Kavya Leela. He talks about platonic love. And I was so surprised to see, in the same year, Telugu poet, the first romantic poet, Rayapurola Subbarao, wrote Platonic Love, 1913, same year. He wrote the same, it's called Trinakankanam, that is the Kavya. And both write about Platonic Love. I don't know whether Kumaranashan named it, his theory. Rayapurola Subbarao named his theory Amalina Sringaram. Since you all know Sanskrit, you can understand the meaning. He called it Platonic Love, Amalina Sringara. And then the whole story is about one boy and girl loving and they getting separated. And when the boy comes back, the girl is already married. And then there is a conversation between the boy and the girl, how the girl teaches him, talks to him about a love which has no physical desire in it. That is Amalina Sringaram. A similar theme that seems to be a coincidence, because the disciple of Guru and our first poet writing the same theme in the same year, both the Kavyas came out in the same year. So I'm able to see a lot of parallels in the whole of whether Kannada or Tamil, or in fact I can go to Subramanya Bharati also, but right now let us stop here. So for Kannada or Tamil or Telugu or Malayalam, we can see parallels. And among them, as I said in the very first sentence, among them Narayana Guru stands tall, mainly because he brought cohesion into all the different things into one place. He believed social consciousness is equal to spiritual consciousness. They are not two separate entities. They will all coexist. They are the same. And that is what we have to achieve. So I am very grateful to you all because I had an opportunity to read Narayana Guru for the sake of this seminar. I thank Ramanuni once again, and I thank all of you for your patient listening to my lecture. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Sree Narayana, for the speech and who is chairing this session.